Good early morning. So the first talk of this session for the day is going to be Liz Fong-Jones from Google's Big Table team. A sign of a mature SRE team is that you have your ratio of interrupts to project work under control. A good guideline is probably less than half, but this is the real world. You can't, keep your interrupts down all the time. Developers will throw you curveballs with new interesting systems that will just catch on fire as soon as you deploy them. So this talk is mostly around, well, what do you do when you realize you have too much interrupts? And hopefully it'll be very interesting. Thanks, Liz.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for waking up so early for my talk. Let's go ahead and get right into it because I only have 20 minutes. I've been an SRE since about 2005, so 11 years. I've been working at Google since 2008. And I've worked on 5 or 6 different teams in my time at Google, and every single one of them has struggled with operational load. So I've been managing since 2015, and I decided that I wanted to try to figure out what can I do to make this problem easier now that I'm in a position to say, hey team, let's try this and see what happens. So very quickly, before we get into what I did to solve the problem, let's talk about the problem. So this is a recap of both Dave O'Connor's excellent bad machinery / dealing with interrupts talk from last SREcon Europe, and also of the dealing with interrupts chapter of the SRE book. So if I go through this too fast, you can go back and look at the SRE book. There's a copy in the Google stand. Really quickly, what do we mean by an interrupt? A ticket or an interrupt is something that you didn't plan, usually requested by a customer, or some kind of a non-critically urgent production issue that still needs to be fixed. It usually takes somewhere between minutes and hours and has an urgency of about days to maybe a week or 2 at the outside. And most of these things can be automated, but it's frequently not worth the effort to automate them if they only happen very rarely. However, they just pile up and pile up and pile up, and you always have to have someone dealing with them. So that's not really wonderful to have at steady state. So what do I mean by a project? Well, a project is a piece of work that you do that instead of being done directly in response to a customer need or in response to a production incident, is something that you're doing to improve the sustainability of your service in the long term. And sometimes you get them done in weeks. Sometimes you never get them done because they are falling off the bottom of your priority queue because you always have this feature that needs to go out or this interrupt that needs to happen. Finally, what do I mean by on-call? Well, the pager goes off, you have to deal with it. So, because I believe in the importance of context, I'm going to say what my context is and say how things might be different for you. That way you can take this lesson in general and apply it to your team rather than just copy-pasting whatever I say to do. That's not necessarily a great idea. So most of the teams I've been in my time at Google have been 6 to 8 people in each of 2 different sites. And we usually have a person who's primary on-call who gets the brunt of the pages, and we have a person who's secondary on-call who's there for if the primary on-call gets overloaded or gets hit by a bus. And most of the time we try to spend on doing projects. Automation, onboarding, monitoring, the usual stuff that you would expect from a SRE team. So these problems also manifest in single site teams. You just might not have 2 different primary and secondary on-calls at a time. You might have just 1 primary and secondary on-call or just 1 primary on-call. And these problems might also manifest if you're a globally distributed team like Heroku, where they don't necessarily have 6 people in one office working on one project. But they still might have 1 person on 24-hour on-call at any given time. So what do you do when you get an interrupt? Well, some people say, let's do the fair thing. Let's go ahead and spread these interrupts across the entire team, so we'll just round robin them between people. That's a great idea, right? Well, there might be some problems with that. So Dave O'Connor goes into this in his talk, and it basically boils down to you have flow and project state, and every time you get an interrupt that you have to deal with within hours, you suddenly drop all of your project state on the floor and then have to spend hours recovering it. So it makes interrupts basically eat twice as much of your time as they should. So maybe round robining each ticket between different members of the team at any given point is not a great idea. What if you found the one expert who is quickest at handling each type of ticket and send only those tickets to those people? That's not fair, and that also gives those people no chance to actually do project work and make their career better and make their team better. So that's not exactly wonderful either. Okay, so maybe experts aren't the right way. What if you use tickets as a training tool? Send the tickets to every single new person on your team. That unfortunately tends to burn people out. If you are doing nothing but operational and interrupt work, then you don't really get a feeling of, hey, I did something that made a difference and made my team better. Instead, you're just doing the same thing day in, day out, and eventually you burn out. So that's not really a kind way to treat new people on your team. So what about hoping? Just hoping the ticket problem gets better. That's really a great idea, right? That doesn't exactly work either, unfortunately. So the solution that Dave O'Connor advocated last year is that you should centralize. You already have a on-call rotation, so why not put the interrupts on the shoulders of the people that are primary or secondary on-call? If they're already getting interrupted, then they have no project state to dump. And if they're not getting paged, they can be working on tickets, which is great. And that is wonderful and works really well, except for that doesn't necessarily make room for actually doing these small things that make your interrupt load get smaller over time. Because treading water isn't acceptable. It's not okay for a SRE team to spend the same amount of people working on the same scope of projects for years and years and years and years. We're engineers. Our job is to automate ourselves out of the job. So we can take, not so that we can turn our team down to zero necessarily, but so that we can take on more responsibility so that instead of only supporting 5 teams, we can support 10 different software development, product development teams. So we need to find ways to make the time to write the automation that will let us get interrupted less often so that we can take on new projects that have a higher interrupt load, or so that we can just spend more time on project work in general. So it's easy for me to say to do this, but I know you probably won't actually do it just because I said you should do this. So let me tell you how you might actually try to do this. Well, so you could just say, hey, one person, your job is to work on every single small little automation task for the next quarter. They're not going to find that horribly rewarding unless they especially like that kind of work. Because it's a very large difference between working on a large project that will take you 3 to 6 months versus doing 12 different one-week projects. And unfortunately, the performance review process for a lot of companies is, what have you done for me recently? And doing 12 little things doesn't really add up to that much. So an approach most Google teams have settled on, but not my team, is why not just treat small projects to reduce interrupts as an interrupt themselves? So this does have some advantages in that you don't overwhelm one person with them, and the hope is that you'll get them done in between periods when there are no tickets. Notice that I said the word hope. So in practice, so this is what you think you're getting. Again, my prototypical setup, my team is split between New York and Dublin, so substitute your choices of site locations and as many as you want. We thought that we'd get each of the secondary on-callers doing about 70% tickets and doing about 30% projects to reduce the number of tickets. Great, right? Well, not so fast. It doesn't actually work that way because doing automation work to reduce interrupts is a form of project. You have state, and when you get a ticket that you have to deal with, you dump all of that state on the floor. So as a result, the tickets just interrupt the focus of your people, and your people wind up doing nothing but tickets. And furthermore, having diffuse responsibility of more than one person responsible for tickets, and having people be able to duck it by saying, oh, I was working on this project, and then not show you the project, that yields really poor results. So this is what we are actually seeing on my team, and I suspect on many other teams that I've been on before that I wasn't paying as close attention to. So, squirrel, oh my goodness, there's a new ticket. I guess I'm not doing this project anymore. Or one of the interesting factors is Dublin and New York overlap by about 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours of our work days, which means that the ticket queue looks perfectly fine even if New York doesn't pay attention to it until half of their workday is gone. And on the flip side, people have a tendency to dump more difficult tickets onto other people because they're not the single person responsible for it, and they can say, hey, I cleared out 5 tickets, and leave the one difficult ticket that's going to take 6 hours to look at for the other site. So these are all problems that are preventable, but can happen if you don't keep a close eye on it. So this is the thing that motivated my team to try to do something different. So we have a term called an interrupt reduction project, which is a small project that takes no more than 1 to 2 weeks that will make a concrete impact in the well-being of the team, whether it be the number of tickets, the amount of pain required to diagnose a ticket, the amount of pain required to diagnose a page. And we make doing these reduction projects a rotation. So we have a rotation by week from person to person to person. So each person that's on secondary on-call does an interrupt reduction project. And we rotate which site is responsible for interrupt reduction projects. I'll show you a slide on this in a minute. And you may say, you know, Liz, this is great, but I can't actually get all of my tickets done with half the number of people. That's okay, you don't have to. The important thing is to pick when you work on a project and when you work on interrupts. So extending Dave O'Connor's idea to focus the interrupt load on people, also focus the interrupt load on days. So it's okay to say, instead of I'm going to have New York work on tickets this quarter and to have Dublin work on interrupt reduction projects this quarter, you can say there's too much load. New York can't handle it by itself. Instead, let's have Dublin work 3 days a week on interrupt reduction tickets, and then on the remaining 2 days, focus entirely on helping New York catch up on tickets. That's okay. Just don't try to intermix it within the same day, or else you're going to devolve to the same problem we had before. And don't be a hero. Don't help out when it's not your time to be on ticket duty. Be intentional. Either you are helping out full-time on interrupts because your interrupts load has spiked. For example, your team went on an offsite and nobody worked on tickets for a week. It's okay to help there, but be structured about it. Don't just go off and be a cowboy or cowgirl. So this is what we wind up doing. What we do is we decide one site for 1 quarter is going to have their secondary on-call work on interrupts, and the other site is going to spend most of their time working on these interrupt reduction projects. So in a minute I'll get into what do I mean by an interrupt reduction project. So there are a couple of things that we find are very quick and very easy and make a tangible benefit to teams. For example, if your automation is broken, causing people to send you tickets. For example, every time a data center turns up, we have to turn up a new big table cell. And if the automation to do that breaks, congratulations, we get to do that by hand. That's not wonderful and fun. So we'd rather get the automation working. And sometimes it's quick and can be done as a ticket, but sometimes it actually is a week-long project. We have to rewrite the automation because there's a new component that we need to interact with. So that can be done as an interrupt reduction project. Another thing you can do is to stop the tickets before they even come in. If your documentation isn't clear enough, you can write the documentation so that customers can solve their own problems instead of having to come to you for help when they don't know what to do. And then finally, you can also do things to reduce your time to resolution and time to detection so that problems don't become quite as bad before you find out about them. So for instance, if you get paged when your disk quota gets to 90%, you can instead do things in order to automatically delete garbage data or delete unused data when you get to 80% so that you hit 90% less often, or so that it's something that's gone really out of control and can't be automatically handled by the time it gets to 90%. So what happened on my team when we tried this? We tried this starting in November last year, so it's been about 8 months. And the pending ticket queue just went way, way, way down. Part of this was the dedicated responsibility of no one being able to punch tickets off onto the other site. But a larger part of this was just we were having fewer new tickets created because of the fact that we'd done this work to reduce incoming tickets and to make tickets faster to resolve. Our inter-site relations got much better. People weren't going, you know, oh my goodness, I hate the person that's on tickets on the other half of my team, they're not doing any work, this is horrible, because we actually had hard data to work with that said either the tickets are getting done or the tickets are not getting done when this site is primarily responsible for tickets. And we got the short projects done that we needed to get done. Instead of having them contend with the large 6 to 8 week projects that your corporate management likely actually cares about, we actually managed to make dedicated time to do these projects and prioritize them separately from the 6 to 8 or 12 or 6-month projects. And we just burned out fewer people. So how do we maximize the effectiveness of this today? Well, one thing that people on my team struggled with initially was, what is an interrupt reduction project? How do I pick one? So we made a list. We said, here are the things that are really bugging people that are in tickets right now. People who are on ticket duty are invited to create new bugs saying, hey, I wish I had time to stop and fix this, but I know that it's a project and it's going to cause me to not actually do it if I'm on interrupts. So instead they make a bug and they add it to a hot list and people will pick things off the hot list to do. And we also try to prioritize the list so that people know what's the most impactful, what's created the most tickets recently, what are the people on my team most upset about. The other thing that we do is a lot of peer pressure. So we have people tell each other, here's what I worked on, here's what the impact on you is, and here is why it will make your life better. And also we send handoffs. So when someone finishes a ticket rotation, they write up a list of here are the things that were worst about the ticket rotation, here's what bugged me the most, here's the new bugs that I filed. And then when someone finishes a interrupt reduction project, they write something saying, here's how I chose the project, here's what it did, and if there's any work that needs to spill over into a second week, here's what you need to do to finish the project. We avoid having more than one handoff. So if a project takes more than 3 weeks, it should be tracked as a regular project, but if it takes 1 or 2 weeks, then it can be done by 1 person or 2 people on consecutive shifts. And finally, credit here to one of my teammates, Chris Coleman-Smith. He said, you should always add to your design documents, how does this avoid adding new toil or new interrupts? And if it does add new interrupts, what's your plan for dealing with this so that we don't have this added ongoing load indefinitely? So that is actually my last slide. If you have any questions, please feel free to come up to the microphone. We've got 2 minutes before the next session starts.
Morning, Liz. I'm just curious, talking with your team, so you have the slide that shows, you know, one side is proactive, one side is reactive. Do you have a sense which of those two a team prefers? Like, do people say, I can't wait till I get to my proactive week? Or is it the case that it's non-intuitive and some people are like thrilled to get to ticket land?
That really depends on the balance of people on each team. I would not say that it's one half of the team at a time that feels strongly one way or the other, and instead it's individual people. For example, people that are super new tend to like feeling productive and want to do a pile of tickets so that they feel that they got something concrete done, even if they don't yet understand the big picture of what makes a great project to work on. On the other hand, people that have been on the team for a while tend to look forward to their proactive interrupt reduction project week because it lets them fix long-standing annoyances that they or their teammates have.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, having been on this rodeo before, once you have a good process for getting rid of toil through these short projects, you can get to a place where there is less need to kick off a large systemic project to fix a large, a big problem. So, oh look, our devs always create this. I like the toil plan and the design docs, but have you seen it where it takes someone super special to notice this is the 5th toil reduction project we have to kick off in this area?
No, we have not yet reached that point, mainly because we've only been at this for 7 months. We've seen such dramatic improvements that we decided it was worth talking about. But it's definitely something that we do need to keep an eye on, and something that having these handoffs rather than just having, okay, you're nebulously working on this set of projects but not showing me anything. If we have the handoffs that say, this is the project that we worked on, these are the benefits, if we see multiple projects in the same area, we can say, okay, does this actually need to be a larger project or not? But even time spent prototyping is not a waste, right? Time spent doing the 1 week fix to something that does actually reduce number of tickets is a perfectly fine improvement. It just means that there might be more room to grow there. Okay, it is 9:20. I don't want to delay the next speaker. Feel free to talk to me after the talk if you have any further questions. Thank you.